He called me useless. He called me dumb. And the worst part? For years, I believed him. I smiled when he humiliated me in front of friends. I stayed quiet when he belittled me in public. I laughed along when he made me the punchline, even though my heart was breaking inside. But while he thought I was shrinking under his words, I was secretly building a whole new life. And the day I finally walked out, with divorce papers on the table and the keys to our house left behind, he realized too late that the woman he underestimated had been outsmarting him all along. This is my story. My quiet revenge. My freedom. If you've ever been underestimated, if anyone has ever tried to make you feel small, listen closely. This is for you. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let me take you through every detail of how I turned his insults into fuel and walked away stronger than I ever imagined. My name isn't important. What matters is what I went through. Because maybe, just maybe, someone listening to this will see themselves in my story. I was 24 when I met Mark. He had this energy about him, the kind that makes people pay attention when he speaks. He could tell the simplest story, and suddenly a whole room would be laughing. He was confident, bold, the type of man my friends whispered about. At first, I was charmed. I thought, maybe this is what I've been waiting for. He seemed strong. He seemed like a protector. And in the beginning, he made me laugh too. But here's the thing about charm, it can be a mask. And masks always slip. The first time he insulted me in public, I told myself it was a joke. We were out to dinner with friends, and I couldn't remember the name of a movie we'd just watched. He leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said, "She forgets everything. Honestly, sometimes I think she's a little slow." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. But I felt my face burn hot, my chest tighten like I'd been punched. I brushed it off. It's just one comment, I told myself. He didn't mean it. But it kept happening. When we were at a barbecue and someone asked about directions, he chuckled. "Don't ask her. She can't read a map to save her life." At another gathering, when someone mentioned managing bills, he cut in. "She's terrible with numbers. I handle all that. She'd lose track of $1 if I let her." The table laughed again. I forced a smile, but my hands were clenched under the tablecloth. And every time, a little piece of me chipped away. I started to wonder if maybe he was right. Maybe I was useless. Maybe I really wasn't smart enough. That's what emotional abuse does. It sneaks up on you. It's not screaming or slamming doors. It's slow. It's steady. A drip of poison, day after day, until you stop recognizing yourself. At first, I fought it. I told myself I was imagining things, that he was just teasing. But the teasing never stopped. And the worst part? It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them. That smirk, that condescending chuckle, like he was the clever one and I was the fool who didn't even know the joke. And the people around us, they laughed along. They didn't see the way my stomach twisted. They didn't see me lying awake at night, replaying every word. I started hiding little parts of myself. If someone asked me a question, I'd hesitate, worried I'd say something stupid that he could turn into a joke. If someone asked my opinion, I'd glance at him first, trying to read his face. I shrank. Quietly, invisibly, I shrank. But here's what he never understood. Just because I was quiet didn't mean I was weak. The night that changed everything is burned into my memory. It was a Saturday. Mark and I had been invited to a small house party hosted by one of his co-workers. Nothing fancy, just a living room filled with people sipping wine, music humming softly in the background, laughter echoing from every corner. For a while, I did what I always did, stood beside him, nodded at the right times, smiled when expected. But then the conversation turned to something I wasn't prepared for, dreams. One of his friends, a woman I barely knew, turned to me with genuine curiosity and asked, "So, what about you? What do you want to do? What's your big goal in life?" I opened my mouth. I wanted to answer. I had an answer. Somewhere deep inside me, I still held onto a little spark of who I was before Mark. But before I could speak, he leaned forward, cut me off, and smirked. "Ha! Don't bother asking. She doesn't really have goals. She's not exactly the ambitious type. The room went quiet. I felt every eye on me, every sip of wine suddenly frozen in midair. Some people shifted uncomfortably, others looked away, embarrassed on my behalf. I laughed. A thin, brittle sound. "He's just joking," I murmured. But inside, I was on fire. My cheeks burned. My stomach churned. And for the rest of the night, I stayed silent. When we got home, I went through the motions. I changed into pajamas, brushed my teeth, crawled into bed. He was already half asleep, snoring softly. But me. I stared at the ceiling, wide awake, tears stinging my eyes. And something broke. It wasn't a loud break. It wasn't a scream or a slammed door. It was quiet, like glass cracking under pressure, almost invisible. But it was there. For the first time in years, my thoughts weren't filled with shame. They were filled with fire. "He's wrong about me." The words whispered in my mind, shaky at first, then louder. "He's wrong. And I'm going to prove it." The next morning, over breakfast, he acted like nothing happened. He buttered his toast, scrolled through his phone, occasionally chuckling at something on social media. I sat across from him, sipping coffee, my heart pounding in my chest. He looked up once, smirked, and said, "You were awfully quiet last night. Shy little thing, aren't you?" I forced a smile. But inside, my decision was already made. He thought he had broken me. He thought I'd accepted my role as the quiet, useless wife who lived in his shadow. But he was wrong. Because that was the night I decided I was going to change my life. And I wasn't going to tell him a damn thing until the day it was too late for him to stop me. The very next week, during my lunch break at work, I walked into the admissions office of a local community college. The woman at the desk looked up, surprised. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said, my voice trembling with nerves but steady with resolve. "I'd like to enroll in night classes." She raised an eyebrow. "We're already midterm. Are you sure you want to jump in now?" I nodded. "I'll make it work." And just like that, my double life began. For the first few nights, I thought he'd notice. I told him I was starting a book club with co-workers. He barely looked up from the TV. I said I'd signed up for yoga classes. He shrugged and said, "Good. Maybe it'll help you with that back pain you always complain about." He didn't question me. Not once. And in some twisted way, that made me even more determined. He was so sure I wasn't capable of ambition that he didn't even consider I might be hiding something. So I slipped out every evening with my backpack, my textbooks tucked inside, and headed to class. The first night, I sat in a cold classroom under buzzing fluorescent lights, staring at the syllabus in front of me. I felt like an imposter. I hadn't studied in years. My brain felt rusty. My hands shook as I took notes. But then, something happened. As the weeks passed, I started to understand. I started to get it. My professors noticed my effort. My classmates asked me questions. For the first time in years, people looked at me not as the dumb girl Mark mocked, but as someone worth listening to. And slowly, I started to believe it too. At home, I played my role. I laughed at his jokes. I nodded when he bragged about work. I stayed quiet when he tossed insults my way. But inside, I had a secret. Every cruel word he threw at me was fuel. Every smirk was motivation. Every time he called me useless, I thought about the stack of essays on my desk, the grades slowly climbing higher and higher. I was proving him wrong, one night class at a time. And he had no idea. When you live a double life, you start to realize how good you can get at lying. At first, it was terrifying. Every time I left the house with my backpack slung over my shoulder, I was sure Mark would stop me. I imagined him narrowing his eyes, asking what was inside, demanding to know why I was leaving at 6:30 sharp every night. But he never did. He was always too distracted by his phone, by the TV, by whatever work gossip he was caught up in. The man who claimed to know me better than anyone in the world didn't notice I was disappearing into the night 4 times a week. That stung at first. You'd think it would be a relief, but really, it was just another reminder of how little he actually saw me. I could have been cheating on him for all he knew. I could have been doing anything. But to him, I was harmless. Invisible. Forgettable. And that was exactly what gave me my freedom. The first semester was brutal. I'd go to work, sit through 8 hours of spreadsheets and endless emails, then drag myself to class. By the time I got home, it was usually past 10 p.m. Mark would already be half asleep, sprawled out on the couch or in bed. I'd sneak into the kitchen, reheat leftovers, and eat in silence at the table. Some nights, I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. I'd sit at my desk, staring at an essay prompt, my head bobbing as sleep threatened to pull me under. But then I'd hear his voice in my head, "You're useless. You're dumb." And like a jolt of electricity, it would wake me right back up. No. Not anymore. I'd drag myself through another paragraph, another problem set, another late-night study session. My eyes burned, my back ached, but I kept going. And slowly, something shifted. The fog in my brain started to lift. I remembered how good it felt to learn, to challenge myself, to feel proud of what I was creating. My professors noticed. One of them pulled me aside after class one evening and said, "You've got a real talent for this. Have you thought about pursuing it seriously?" I almost laughed. Pursue it seriously? Me? Mark's useless little shadow? But the thought stuck with me all the way home. Of course, I couldn't tell him. To Mark, my nights were filled with yoga, or book clubs, or whatever other excuse I'd fed him that week. He never asked questions. And if he did, it was always in that dismissive way, like he wasn't really interested in the answer. Book club again? As long as it keeps you out of trouble. That was his favorite line. And oh, if only he knew what kind of trouble I was really getting into. But the secrecy wasn't easy. I had to be careful. My textbooks lived in a locked drawer at work. My assignments were done in the quiet corners of coffee shops before class. At home, I hid everything. There was one close call I'll never forget. I had left my notebook on the kitchen counter one morning, open to a page of statistics problems. When I came home that night, my heart sank. Mark was sitting at the table, the notebook in front of him. "What's this?" he asked, flipping through the pages. My palms went sweaty. My throat went dry. But I forced a laugh. "Oh, that. One of the girls at work is taking a course. She left it at the office, and I said I'd look over it for her." He smirked. "Good thing she didn't ask you to actually help her with it. You'd probably just confuse her more." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled tightly, snatched the notebook, and shoved it in my bag. That night, I sat in my car in the driveway for 15 minutes, shaking with rage. That was the closest he'd come to discovering my secret, and even then, his arrogance blinded him. He couldn't imagine me being capable of something so ambitious. And in a twisted way, that was my greatest weapon. His underestimation of me was the shield that kept my secret safe. The months rolled on. Seasons changed. I watched snow melt into spring rain, then into the humid air of summer, all through the windows of my classrooms. And with each semester, my confidence grew. My grades climbed higher. My professors encouraged me. My classmates started asking me for help. One even joked, "You're basically our unofficial tutor." Me. A tutor. The girl who was too dumb to have goals. It was like slowly waking up from a long, cruel sleep. I started to carry myself differently. At work, I spoke up more. I offered ideas in meetings. I stopped apologizing every time I opened my mouth. And people noticed. My boss gave me more responsibilities. My coworkers treated me with respect. At home, Mark barely noticed the difference. Or maybe he did, but he twisted it into something ugly. "You've been acting cocky lately," he said once, narrowing his eyes at me. "Don't forget who you are." Who I was. For years, I had let him define me. Dumb. Useless. Forgettable. But not anymore. Because late at night, while he slept soundly in our bed, I sat at my desk, bathed in the glow of a single lamp, my textbooks spread out around me. And I could feel it, I was building something. Piece by piece, assignment by assignment, semester by semester. I was building a future he couldn't touch. And I knew, deep in my bones, that one day, I'd walk away from him for good. That thought used to scare me. But now it was the only thing keeping me going. I will never forget the day I put on my graduation gown. It wasn't even a fancy ceremony, just a simple hall with folding chairs, harsh fluorescent lights, and a stage that smelled faintly of floor polish. But when I slipped that gown over my shoulders and looked at myself in the mirror, I felt like I was staring at a stranger. No, not a stranger, someone I used to dream about becoming. Someone stronger. Someone capable. I remember clutching the little square cap in my hands, my fingers trembling. It wasn't the trembling of fear this time, it was the trembling of pride. Quiet, private pride. Nobody else knew what it had taken for me to get there. Mark thought I was working extra hours at the library. He had no idea I had spent countless nights hunched over textbooks, scribbling notes until my eyes blurred, whispering answers to myself on the bus ride home. When my name was called, I walked across that stage alone. There was no family cheering for me, no partner waiting with flowers, no proud husband snapping photos. And yet, the silence felt fitting. This moment wasn't for anyone else. It was for me. The diploma was just paper, but when I held it in my hands, I felt like I was holding proof that I was not broken. Proof that I could build something, even out of the ruins Mark tried to bury me in. But graduating was just the first step. The real test came after, finding a job. I sent out applications like I was throwing paper airplanes into the wind. Resume after resume, cover letter after cover letter. Most of them never even got a reply. Some sent back the polite rejection emails, "Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to move forward with other candidates." Each rejection stung, like tiny reminders whispering, "See? You're still not good enough." But this time, I didn't let those voices take root. I had spent too many years listening to Mark's poison. I refused to replace his voice with my own doubt. Instead, I told myself, every no is one step closer to a yes. Weeks turned into months. I would come home after long days of sending out applications, force a smile at Mark, and cook dinner like nothing had changed. He still had no clue. If he had, he would have mocked me, told me I was wasting my time, laughed at the idea of anyone hiring me. And then, it happened. I remember the email so vividly. My hands were greasy from chopping vegetables when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't check it right away, thinking it was just another automated rejection. But when I wiped my hands and glanced at the screen, my breath caught. "We are pleased to offer you the position." I froze. My heart pounded in my ears. I read the words 3 times before they sank in. I had done it. I had a job. A real job. Not just surviving, not just scraping by. A career. The first day at the office, I walked in wearing clothes I had secretly bought with the little savings I managed to tuck away from Mark's prying eyes. Nothing fancy, just a simple blouse and slacks. But to me, it felt like armor. When I sat at my desk for the first time, my hands on a computer keyboard that was actually mine to use, not his, I almost cried. It was like stepping into another world. The first paycheck was the moment that really hit me. I remember opening the envelope, my fingers trembling. And when I saw the number, my knees nearly gave out. I was making more in a month than Mark did. I stared at those numbers for what felt like hours. Part of me wanted to laugh, part of me wanted to scream, and part of me just wanted to cry. For years, he told me I was nothing, worthless, incapable of surviving without him. And now, here I was, quietly surpassing him. I didn't tell him, of course. I let him keep believing he was the provider, the successful one. I let him keep walking around with his smug smirk, tossing his keys on the table like a king coming home to his castle. All the while, I was building an empire of my own in silence. The transformation wasn't just about money, though. It was about me. I started carrying myself differently. My back straightened, my voice stopped trembling when I spoke. I no longer avoided mirrors. I no longer flinched at the sound of his footsteps in the hallway. It was subtle, at first. Mark didn't notice immediately, but I could see it in myself. I could feel it. The timid, broken version of me was slowly fading, replaced by someone sharper, stronger, harder to break. Every time I achieved something new at work, a compliment from my boss, a project finished successfully, an idea I shared that others actually listened to, it was like another piece of my shattered self clicked back into place. And then came the day that changed everything. I had been secretly saving money for months. Every paycheck, I tucked a little away in an account Mark didn't know existed. It was like watering a secret garden only I could see. One afternoon, after work, I met with a realtor. My palms were sweating the entire time, but my voice stayed steady as I walked through the rooms of a modest little house. It wasn't grand. It wasn't luxurious. But it was mine, or it would be. When I signed the papers and they slid the deed across the desk, I stared at it for the longest time. My name. My signature. My house. No one could take it from me. Not Mark. Not his words. Not his cruelty. That night, I went home like nothing had happened. Mark was sprawled on the couch, beer in hand, barking at the TV. He didn't even look up when I walked through the door. And in that moment, I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I knew something he didn't. I was no longer trapped. That was the real transformation. Not the gown. Not the diploma. Not even the paycheck. It was the knowledge that I had rebuilt myself, brick by brick, in the shadows of his insults. And now, I had everything I needed to walk away. For the first time in years, I could breathe. And soon, very soon, I was going to do the one thing Mark never expected. I was going to leave. Money. 4 years, it was the chain Mark used to keep me bound. Every grocery trip, every bill, every little thing I had to ask, justify, beg. But now the balance had shifted. The first time my salary hit my own account, I just sat there staring at the numbers. I remember thinking, this can't be real. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe someone's going to snatch this away from me. I didn't touch the money for a week. It just sat there, glowing on the screen every time I logged into online banking. I'd refresh the page over and over, afraid the numbers would vanish like a dream. But they didn't. It was mine. That paycheck wasn't just money. It was freedom, proof, power. The small victories. I started with small things. I bought myself a pair of shoes, comfortable, professional, nothing fancy. But when I wore them to work, people noticed. Nice shoes, a colleague said casually. They didn't know that for me, those shoes weren't just leather and stitches. They were a declaration. I don't need his permission anymore. The next month, I upgraded my phone. Mark had kept me on his old, hammer-down devices for years. Always justifying it with, why do you need a new one? You barely understand how to use the old one. Now, I held my brand new phone in my hands, unboxing it quietly in my room like a child hiding a secret toy. I set it up with my own number, my own plan. For the first time in my adult life, I was untraceable by him. And that tiny, glowing rectangle felt like a weapon of independence. Secret accounts, secret dreams. With each paycheck, I tucked money away. I opened a separate account that Mark knew nothing about. Every month, I'd move a chunk of my salary there, watching the balance grow like a little fortress. Sometimes, I'd just log in at night after he was asleep and stare at it. The digits climbing, giving me a kind of peace I had never known. I began dreaming of bigger things. A home. My own space. Walls where his voice never echoed, where my worth was never measured in chores or meals cooked. The idea started as a whisper, then grew louder and louder until it was all I could think about. I wanted a house. Not just an apartment, a house. A place where every brick was mine, where the air itself would never carry his shadow. The house hunt. I remember the first time I met with a realtor. My hands shook as I signed the guest log at her office. I kept expecting her to ask, "Where's your husband? Don't you need him to co-sign?" But she didn't. She just looked at me like I was any other client. A woman searching for her home. The first few houses I toured were disasters, too small, too rundown, or way out of budget. But each time I walked through a front door, I felt something new, possibility. I could almost see myself there, my books on the shelves, my laughter echoing down the hall, my silence when I wanted it. And then, I found it. It wasn't the biggest or fanciest. Just a modest, two-bedroom house with warm sunlight spilling into the kitchen and a little garden out back. The moment I stepped inside, I felt a shift in my chest, like the house itself whispered, "Welcome home." I tried not to cry in front of the realtor. But inside, I was already planting flowers in the backyard, already making tea by the window, already imagining nights where I'd fall asleep without fear of his footsteps. Signing the deed. The day I signed the deed, I thought my hands would never stop trembling. Pen on paper, signature after signature. And then, finally, the words. "Congratulations. You're now a homeowner." I nodded politely, but inside, a storm was raging. I wanted to scream, to laugh, to cry, to tell the whole world, I did this. Me. The woman he called stupid. The woman he said would never survive without him. I walked out of that office with the keys in my palm. Cold, metallic, heavy with meaning. Keys to a door no one could lock me out of. Keys to a life no one could dictate. I didn't go straight there. Not yet. I drove around the city first, letting the moment sink in. I kept the keys in the passenger seat, glancing at them like they might disappear. But they didn't. The double life intensifies. Back at home, I lived as if nothing had changed. Mark still came home, tossed his shoes in the hallway, and demanded dinner. Still made his comments. Still called me useless. But now, when he spoke, his words slid right off me. Because I knew something he didn't. I wasn't his prisoner anymore. I had a secret so powerful it made me almost smile when he ranted. Because I knew. I could leave any time. I already had a door waiting for me. At night, when he snored beside me, I'd scroll through photos of my house. The walls, the windows, the little garden. My sanctuary. My escape. Every cruel word from him became fuel. Every insult was just another brick in the walls I was building far away from him. The turning point. There was one evening I'll never forget. We were at dinner, and Mark was mocking me for something I don't even remember what. Maybe I mispronounced a word, or maybe he just needed to feel tall by making me small. But that night, instead of shrinking inside, I looked at him and thought, "You don't even know I've already outgrown you." It was the first time I wasn't hurt. The first time I didn't feel crushed. The first time his power over me cracked. I went to bed that night, keys under my pillow, and slept peacefully. Because I knew soon. I'd never have to listen to him again. Foreshadowing the escape. Leveling up wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming my soul, one step at a time. I bought things without fear. I planned without asking. I breathed without permission. And slowly, the cage he built around me fell apart. He didn't see it. Abusers never do. They believe their control is permanent, unshakable. But what they never realize is that sometimes silence isn't submission, it's strategy. I was quiet. Yes. But only because I was planning my exit. I was obedient, yes. But only because I wanted the timing perfect. I was still there, yes. But not for long. Because soon, I'd not only leave, I'd make sure he knew exactly what he lost. And that, I think, is the sweetest part of revenge. I remember waking up that morning with a knot in my stomach. It wasn't the usual dull ache of dread I carried every day, this one felt sharper, alive, almost electric. My body knew what my mind hadn't fully admitted yet. Today was different. Today, I wasn't just surviving. I was leaving. The sun slipped in through the curtains, lighting up the room I once thought would be my safe haven, my home. Instead, it had become my prison. Every corner held echoes of my humiliation, the smashed vase he threw at the wall during an argument, the dent in the door he punched because I talked back, the silence that screamed louder than any words when he came home late, smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. For months, I had been secretly preparing. Little by little, I stashed away money, cash hidden inside books he'd never open, at the back of kitchen drawers, even inside my old makeup bag. I had packed a small suitcase weeks ago, tucked behind boxes in the storage closet. It held only what I needed, a few clothes, some documents, and photos of my parents, a reminder of the girl I used to be before him. The fear was real. If he discovered my plan, I didn't know what he would do. Would he beg me to stay, promising to change like he had before? Or would his rage consume him and push him to hurt me worse than ever? Both possibilities terrified me. But even more terrifying was the thought of staying. That morning, I went through the motions of being his wife one last time. I made breakfast, placed the cup of coffee on the table, and watched him scroll through his phone, barely acknowledging my presence. He didn't even look at me when I set down his plate. And in that moment, I realized I was already invisible to him. A ghost in my own life. He left for work without a word. Not even a goodbye. The door slammed, and the silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't suffocating. It was freedom, whispering in my ear, "Now. Go now." My hands trembled as I went to the closet and pulled out the suitcase. It wasn't heavy, but my heart felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Each step I took toward the front door was a war between fear and hope. My legs shook, my breath came fast, but I kept moving. I paused at the door, my hand resting on the handle. I looked back at the house, at the walls that had absorbed my tears, at the rooms where I had lost myself piece by piece. "Never again," I whispered. And then, I opened the door. The world outside looked brighter, like it had been waiting for me. The air felt different on my skin, fresh, alive, full of possibilities. I walked down the steps with my suitcase rolling behind me, and with every step, I felt lighter. I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving behind years of pain, lies, and broken promises. I had arranged everything in secret. A friend I trusted waited at the corner with her car. When she saw me, she jumped out, hugged me tight, and whispered, "You're safe now." Those 3 words broke me open. I cried in her arms, not from sadness, but from release. For the first time in years, I wasn't crying because of him. I was crying because I had finally chosen me. As we drove away, I stared at the rearview mirror, watching the house shrink into the distance. It felt like watching a monster fade away. My prison was behind me. My life, my real life, was ahead. But don't mistake this for an ending. No. This was just the beginning. Leaving him was step 1. What came next, that was where the real revenge began. Because he thought he broke me. He thought I would crawl away and disappear, just another discarded woman in his story. But I wasn't disappearing. I was rising. And soon, he would know what it feels like to be powerless. That day wasn't just the day I left him. It was the day I found myself again. The morning after I left, I woke up in my friend's guest room. The sunlight filtered through pale curtains, soft and golden, warming my face. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to check my phone in fear. I didn't dread footsteps in the hallway. I didn't need to rehearse my words in my head before speaking. I was free. But freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like silence. Like an empty room where your soul slowly stretches after being cramped for too long. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, realizing, this is my life now. Mine. The first taste of peace. I spent those first few weeks rediscovering myself. I walked barefoot in the grass at dawn. I ate breakfast at noon if I wanted. I laughed with my friends without worrying about someone twisting my words later. But it wasn't all easy. Some nights, loneliness curled around me like a shadow. I missed the idea of him, not the man he really was, but the fantasy I'd clung to for years. Healing is messy. There were tears, doubts, moments of temptation to go back. But every time I wavered, I remembered the bruises, the lies, the betrayal. And I remembered the woman I was becoming, a woman who didn't beg for scraps of love. A woman who demanded respect or walked away. Leaving him physically was one thing, but taking back control of my life required something more: justice. I filed for divorce. I exposed his financial secrets, his fake business trips, the loans he had taken out in my name. Piece by piece, I dismantled the empire of lies he had built around me. He thought I would crumble without him. Instead, I thrived. My lawyer was sharp, and I gave her every piece of evidence I had: texts, bank records, photos. When we finally stood in court, I didn't look like the broken wife he had left behind. I walked in wearing confidence like armor. My head held high. My voice steady. He avoided my eyes. The judge saw through him. The financial settlement, the exposure of his debts, the shame in front of his family, it was the sweetest form of revenge. I didn't have to scream, I didn't have to fight dirty. I simply let the truth speak. And it destroyed him more than I ever could have planned. But my real revenge wasn't in the courtroom. It came the day I ran into him months later. He looked older, thinner, restless. The arrogance in his posture had melted into something hollow. And me. I was glowing. I had a new apartment, a job I loved, and friends who reminded me every day that I was worthy of happiness. When he saw me smiling, truly smiling, it shattered him. Because the one thing narcissists can't stand is this, knowing you moved on without them. That you're happier now than you ever were with them. My revenge wasn't screaming in his face. My revenge was the quiet power of living well. Of laughing louder. Loving myself harder. Of not needing him, not even a little. Today, I am not the woman who once sat on the bathroom floor, clutching her chest, wondering how she would survive. I'm the woman who survived. Who rebuilt. Who took her pain and made it into fire. I travel when I want. I decorate my home with things I love. I dance barefoot in my kitchen. I write my story so other women know, you are not alone. You are not weak for staying, and you are not selfish for leaving. My ex-husband? He's just a chapter in my book. A dark one, yes, but not the ending. The message to you. If you're listening to this and you feel trapped, hear me. You can leave. You can rebuild. You can transform your pain into power. And the sweetest revenge? It isn't in making him suffer. It's in living a life so full, so beautiful, so unapologetically yours, that he becomes irrelevant. I no longer wake up wondering who I need to be for someone else. I wake up and simply, And that, right there, is the greatest revenge of all. If my story touched you, if you saw a part of yourself in my words, don't stay silent. Hit that subscribe button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and remember, you are stronger than you think. This is AI Neurobeat, where stories are not just told, they are felt. Until next time.